From the first handheld mobile phone in 1973 to the first iPhone in 2007, the development of mobile phones and smartphones has seen years of advancements. But how did mobile phones transform from cumbersome devices to small, smart, and mobile? Let's find out. We live in a world of endless technological advancements, and in just over a century, we have gone from the flippers to the smartphones. There is a lot to learn from the origins of these amazing devices and the people that made them. Through communication, we have the power to share our ideas and thoughts with the world, but not without risk. Speaking into a mobile phone was a risky experiment, but when the first mobile phone call was made, it became clear just how powerful this invention would become and how the world would change accordingly. While mobile phones are a relatively new innovation, if you recall the trend of 1973, the concept of a portable telephone is as ancient as the telephone itself. For years, the best anybody could provide were massive two-way radio equipment that resembled walkie-talkies and took up the whole trunk of your vehicle. However, a number of major technological breakthroughs and a classic story of American commercial rivalry will indeed help build the groundwork for the technology that would transform the way people interact. Ever since the start of the 20th century, people have imagined a future in which they would be able to communicate with one another indefinitely, without the constraints of wires and cables. With the emergence of wireless transmission in the early 1900s, as well as landline telephone systems, it was easy to believe that the creation of actual cell phones, as we see them nowadays, would occur much earlier than it did. For the majority of their existence, mobile handsets were primarily two-way radios that were mounted on moving objects. In the 1920s, German railway operators started testing wireless communications in their train carriages, first with military railways on a restricted number of lines and then expanding to ordinary trains. Zur Telefonie AG, a provider of mobile telephone technology for use on trains, was formed in 1924, and the next year witnessed the first public distribution of wireless cell phones for first-class passengers on important rail routes between Hamburg and Berlin. Between the 1940s and 1950s, several firms in the United States and abroad began developing telephone systems built for use in vehicles. Nevertheless, their military counterparts had significant disadvantages. They were huge systems that needed a huge amount of power, had minimal support, and the networks couldn't handle more than a few active links at the same time. These constraints would hinder mobile phones for years and restrict how quickly the technology could be embraced by the general population. Due to the increased need for improved mobile telephony, AT&T's Bell Labs set about inventing a system for making and answering calls inside vehicles that enabled for a higher amount of calls to be made in a certain region at the same time. They launched their mobile application in 1946, which AT&T marketed as the mobile telephone service in 1949. Unfortunately, the service was reluctant to take off, with just a few thousand clients in roughly 100 different locations. The technology needed an employee at a switchboard to establish a connection, and users had to press a button to communicate and let go of it to hear, treating it more like a military transmitter than the previous telephone system. The connection was also quite costly, and the frequency band accessible for connected users was restricted to as few as 3 in certain regions, and with a discussion taking up the full bandwidth for the length of the call. There could never have been more active talks than available channels. In the 1940s, Bell Labs technicians were developing a new technology to increase the performance of these connections. However, as early as 1947, W. Ray Young and Douglas Ring presented the concept of a grid of cells to assist control channel usage and prevent disturbance. Unfortunately, the technology was just not available at the time, and it might take several couples of years before a team of Bell Labs employees, Richard Frankiel and Philip Porter, would flesh out this vision of cells into a more thorough proposal for a vehicle mobile telecommunications network. AT&T's had previously persuaded the Federal Communications Commission to create plenty of the frequency range accessible for radio telephones, allowing them to utilize additional channels. Other key advances in the 1970s were automated cell switching and signaling systems, which enabled devices to keep a connection while moving from one cell to another, therefore increasing the range that cellular telephone services could serve. All of these advancements, however, were put to use in the creation of mobile phones for transportation. The first handheld mobile phone, as we know it today, would be invented by an upstart. Although Bell Labs was developing the technology that would become the global system for mobile as we know it today, they were having less success in developing a real portable, handheld telephone. They had spent a significant amount of time and work building what we used to call the automobile phone. However, it is no longer the case, since handheld phones have mostly replaced them. The efforts of a little corporation called Motorola and a guy named Marty Cooper is the reason we don't all have vehicle phones now. In 2003, Cooper told the BBC that he felt people didn't want to chat in automobiles and that people wanted to communicate with other people. And the only way their small firm could demonstrate this to the globe was to really showcase that they could make a cell phone, which is nothing but a personal telephone. With support from his employer, Motorola's head of mobile communication systems, John Mitchell, Cooper and Motorola engineers created the first operational cell phone prototype. Cooper tested the first public mobile telephone call in the historical record on April 3, 1973, before leaping into a press summit in Manhattan to display the new product that would go on to fundamentally change communications. Cooper contacted his colleague at Bell Labs, Joel Angel, and told him that he is calling him from an actual cellular telephone, a portable handheld phone. Putting AT&T in the bag was an exhilarating experience for Motorola. They had taken on a business that had a stranglehold over American telephone networks at the time. Cooper said that it's one of the greatest pleasures in life when you're in a competitive organization like they were. Although the very first cell phone was shown in 1973, it would take several years for Motorola's mobile phone to reach the market for commercial service for portable cell phones to begin. No one, not even Cooper, considered Motorola's Dynatac 8000X, which sold for about $3,500 at the time, as the very first milestone toward a telecom revolution. Cooper stated in 2003 that he had to admit that global mobile phone usage would have been a leap at the time, and those initial phones cost $3,500 in 1983, which is really equal to $7,000 now. However, we did imagine a day when the phone would be so little that you could put it inside your pocket or perhaps fit it in your palm. Cooper chose not to accept the title, Father of the Cell Phone, bestowed upon him by history, since he thought it should be shared. Even though I thought of it, he said, it actually needed collaboration, and potentially thousands of people ended up generating the concept of what a mobile phone is today, which, by the way, is not complete. We're working diligently on it and will always keep improving it. And that wraps up today's video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and just before you go, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. With that said, take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.